Hi, everybody, and welcome to Sally Talk. Thank you so much for joining. I'm excited today because I have a really great guest. He's a wonderful musician. I love talking music. One of the things you'll see on my podcast is that I have a lot of musicians and talented people on because I love to hear them talk about the creative process and how things come about. So I have Ryan Mascilak on, and I'll introduce him in just a second. 1 second, I want to do my plug for my sponsor, Arbonne International. For 40 years, Arbonne International and our founder, Petter Mork, started our company to bring you products that were safe for your body, for the trees, for the animals. We don't test on animals. We make sure that all our products and packaging is recyclable. And just recently, we became a B Corporation, which we're so proud of because now we can show and we're transparent as to where all of our profits go, that we're trying to help the world. We're trying to bring a safe product to you and your family. And so if you want more information, please contact me at sallyholida.arbonne.com. That's sallyholida.arbonne.com. Or my Facebook is Sally Holida or Instagram is Sally Holida. So thanks again for checking that out. Okay, so Ryan, real quick, I want to do backstory before you talk. I like to say where my guests come from because this is my podcast and I get to decide where my guests come from and who I want to interview. So my friend Liz sings with a praise band at St. Finbar, and she keeps bragging about her wonderful, talented young music director at St. Finbar. And so she invited me to a Veterans Day performance at and you have to remind me what the name of the thing is, you'll tell me in a minute. There's actually a Civil War museum, and I went down to that for the Veterans Day, and she said, oh, he wrote music to poems from Gettysburg, and we're going to perform that, and Liz's husband was going to perform with him. And I was like, oh, well, I'm all over that because I'm obsessed with Civil War. I love the Civil War ever since I was a kid. And I had just finished the Ulysses S. Grant biography, so I was wanting to talk to anybody who wanted to talk about the Civil War. So, of course, I go down there. It was a beautiful concert, which we'll talk about. But also, Ryan and I started talking about the Civil War, and I said, well, you've got to come on my podcast because we've got to talk about the Civil War because it's important, and it's important for people to remember about it. And that's what I love what he's doing with this beautiful album. That is an album, and it's available for you to listen to. And so I just wanted to have you on and talk about it. So thank you for being on. Welcome to Sally Talk. So why don't you start off by telling why you would write an album in 2020, or it wasn't 2020, I guess, 2019 or whatever, 2018. Why would you decide, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write an album of Civil War poetry. And I'm going to do this. What in the world? Where did this come from?
Well, thanks for having me on, Sally. This is great. I love this. So I guess I could go back to fourth grade, actually. We were given an assignment in class for extra credit. If you memorize the Gettysburg Address and recited it in class, you got the credit. And it wasn't due till, I think, the end of the semester, several months down the road. And I memorized it that night. And the rest, my other homework, I think I failed to do for that day. It was
short, though. It was famous.
Oh yeah,
exactly. Famous short speech.
Yeah. No, that helped. And I recited it the next day in class, and that's the first memory I have of my love for history and especially for U.S. history. And then, fast forward to just a couple years ago. I was fortunate enough to sing for one of my cousin's weddings out in western Pennsylvania. And so we went out and I sang the ceremony, and then we decided to visit Gettysburg while we were out there. So we drove across the state, and, my parents had wanted to go on a family trip to Gettysburg from New England, where I was born and raised. And never happened, and so it was long overdue, this visit, and I could tell why as soon as I went there. I mean, what a place. So there's this little bookshop in downtown Gettysburg called For the Historian. And I went in there, and on one of the bottom shelves, there's this book called Poetry of the Civil War. The first half is a collection of poems for and about the Union, and the second half is poems for and about the Confederacy. And, they were written by soldiers, people that were involved in the war, famous authors of the 1860s. And I thought, I love, Americana music, folk, Appalachian country, everything that stems from roots of 19th century America. I'm gonna put these poems to music. And I got the idea right then. I bought the book, and I actually started telling people, because I went into some other shops down, in downtown, and I was just telling some of the shop owners and the little businesses, and first time visiting, and I've got this project I'm working on, writing music to Civil War poetry, as if it already existed, and they're like, "Hey, sounds good. Yeah, let us know how it turns out, and we'd love to hear about it."
It reminds me of LinManuel Miranda, which I've said to you, when there's a great video where he's at the White House and he goes there. He's like, "I'm going to sing something I'm working on. It's a musical about
really?
Alexander Hamilton." Yeah.
Oh man.
And it's hilarious that everybody goes, "Okay."
Oh right. Yeah.
You do that. That sounds crazy.
Yeah.
So that's what I love about it, was that you were inspired to do it. So were you really thinking you were going to do a whole album, or were you thinking I'll do one or two, or were you thinking I'm going to do this book? Was it the whole book?
Was not the whole book. I mean, the whole book would be
too much.
That would be like
okay.
what's the word? Like a volume. That would be a 4-disc, No, I just figured I'll do a handful, do a small collection.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're so easy to write too. And I love the style of music. So this was a chance to, I love 1860s American music. What am I going to do? Who's going to listen? Am I just going to wake up and say, I'm just going to write, this kind of music? And, okay, cool. And, there may be 9 people who would
but why is that? Why? Now I know you went to Berkeley, so you're
College of Music.
College of Music, and that's right. You got to make sure you clarify that, because there's.
I grew up in Massachusetts, and I didn't even. I only knew Berkeley, California. I didn't know there was the College of Music 30 miles away.
So funny, yeah. And so, so you wanted to be a musician. When did you decide you wanted to be a musician? Like, where did that come from? When did you start playing? So you play a lot of instruments, because you play guitar. I know you play guitar, piano, and like mandolin. You play other instruments, right? You play a lot of instruments.
Well, my mom was my first music teacher. She started teaching me when I was 4. Yeah, she's a piano teacher. Has been her whole life. And then that lasted a while until I rebelled off of. I wanted another teacher. So by the time I was 12, that's what it was. She said what was the deal? She got me my first guitar. There was some deal. I had I'm blanking on it. She's going to remember.
No, that's right. So
but I wanted to learn when I was 12.
And you changed your mind. You said, I want to play the guitar, and rebelled against the piano?
Well, yeah, I didn't want to take, classical lessons anymore. I wanted to do my own thing. Which, by the way, learning to read and take traditional music lessons I teach music all the time, and that's imperative. So I'm not discrediting that at all. It's very, very important to learn that. And I just wanted to also strengthen and learn about writing and composing. And that's, I started about 12, I think, is when I wrote my first melody. And then once I did that, and I was like, this is what I want to do. So I studied film scoring at Berkeley. And this, in a sense, this project, this album, in a sense, you're putting music. It's putting music to something. And when you score a scene, you're writing to the character or the emotion or the action that's happening, and just expressing it in a musical sense. And that was the same approach I had with the poems. well, who wrote the poem? Who is this about? So they've written the words, the text. So how's the melody going to portray that? Or how's the arrangement? Or how's the rhythm? What's it calling for? So it was the same approach as I did with scoring.
Oh, that's so interesting. It's so funny. That might be why I love it so much, because I love music scores. Ever since I was a little kid, I've always loved the music in the movies. I've always noticed it. I had favorite, composers of different films. I was a kid and I knew who Max Steiner was, and I knew I knew all of the names of all the old guys, the new guys. When Star Wars came out, the first Star Wars in 1977, I'm giving away my age. I remember I had to buy the soundtrack. I had to, because I always love it. So maybe that's where I was really taken with Marching Still, because I think I saw that. I felt like it was it was almost like I was imagining in my head the movie or the actual scene, and then there was the music to it. So I could kind of tell that. That's really cool.
Saving Private Ryan was the movie that did it for me, because I saw that. I was probably 13 or so. It's too young to see it. Mm-hmm. But that was the movie that I remember distinctly. I want to be involved somehow in the music, film music.
Yeah, Hymn of the Fallen.
It. Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then it's a U.S. history movie. Mm-hmm. It's a war movie. It's more than that, but it's got everything. Mm-hmm. So, this Marching Still, this album is, that's the approach that I've taken with it, and that's what I want to do with it. And I see many avenues that it could be arranged, and very exciting. Yeah.
And I think too nowadays, because we have multimedia, people tend to like to multitask when they're learning, and instead of back in the day when people would just read, or they would do, they need kind of multi to really get the feeling of it. Yeah. I think we like because we are visual, and then we like the music, and we like all the layers, and so it brings a layer and kind of brings it to life.
Oh yeah,
we were talking about how it brings it to life, and then with a new, so you're taking something that was in a book, and it's beautiful poetry, but then to just kind of give it that extra layer, and so it does kind of bring it current in a way.
Yeah, and it's the music is written, so I imagined it. If the writer, the poet is this, this boy, and he's out in the campfire, and they're out in the field, and it's he's one of his friends is a banjo player or a fiddle player. What would that friend have done or tagged along, written while he was writing the poem? So I wanted to be true to, melodically and with the chords and the arrangement and the instrumentation, but it's not. Precisely, I did not infuse it with, this is going to be, played on only a 6-string guitar that would have been built in 1860, and it's not like that. It's got a contemporary feel to it for sure, and it certainly works in a contemporary environment for contemporaries, voices and singers and ensembles. It's, I consider it a country, a folk album with a little bit of country and Appalachia. But it's a blend of both. It's not strictly 1862. It's not strictly contemporary.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because for me, the poems, the words are timeless. So I want them, I want it to have a little bit both of the present day and a little bit of the past, and that's how you, not to be cliche, but that's how you build your future, is be aware of your present and remember the past.
Exactly, and that's what I loved about it too, because that's my thing. I love history. I love reading about the past because I think it's really important. I feel like lately, it seems like people don't really sing this with love. It doesn't seem like people really know where we came from and really look at the past and understand where we're coming from and where we came, what people went through, like what they went through back then. I mean, it was a unbelievable, bloody war. It was the most bloody. We lost more casualties in that war than in any other. I think all of them combined. It combined, right? All of the ones since then combined. The casualties, even the amount of casualties we had in World War II were not as much as we had. Of course, they were fighting each other, so you get to double it. But it was a brutal time in literally your backyard, town over, and wiped out a huge portion of the male population, especially the male population, and it was just horrible and bloody. And so the fact that we need to know and remember about it because it's important so that we don't get back in, we don't repeat it is a big thing, I think. Absolutely. And, you hear talk, nowadays, and it's sort of back in this, a civil war is coming, and those are strong words. Yes. Those are strong words. Mm-hmm. You're really saying something if you, and I'm not saying whether it's, I know how true it is or isn't, but we've been through this before as a nation and people. And, stuff is, we're certainly in a turbulent time now and have been the few years. It was really bad in the 1850s and 60s. It was bad. Yeah. And even after in the 70s, even 1870s when Grant was president, it was nasty. People were killing people. Oh, yeah. Literally killing people that they didn't agree with. Yeah. And you could argue, it doesn't get worse than that. It does not get worse than a civil war. No. So yeah, it's so that's why I loved it too, because it was just, part of what I love, and I love and know so much about it. So I really felt like I identified with it. So what is nice is we actually have a track that I'm going to play here on Sally Talk, which I'm excited that I figured out how to do it. So I want you to talk about marching now. So the album is called Marching Still, but this is the namesake kind of song from the album. So this actually wasn't in that book. So tell me where this song came from, and then we'll play it. So Marching Still. So I had written, taken about 11, 12 poems that I had put to songs, and almost all of them were from the poetry book, and then a couple of them, 2 or 3, were I found online and just doing more research because I wanted some other themes in different settings. And then it had been months since, because I spent, that was May when I first visited Gettysburg in May 2018. So it was the rest of that year that I was writing and then recording and working on it. And it was months had gone by. I hadn't written anything. I figured I was done. And then I came back to it and I thought, what am I going to title the album? I went through a few different ones. One of them was, I was calling it In Their Own Words. So, in the words of the people back then. And that was the best one I could come up with. And then I was doing some more searching for poems online, and then I found one by this poet, a woman named Minna Irving, who was born in 1872 and lived in Sleepy Hollow, New York. And it was the only poem. It was this poem was written so most amount of time after the Civil War when she wrote it. I think after maybe even 1900. But the poem is titled Marching Still. And it tells the story of this widowed mother who has 7 sons. And they all go off to fight and they all die. And she's coping with that reality. And it tells it from an outside perspective of the mother. And I read the poem. I hadn't even read the whole thing. Read the first couple stanzas. And it was one of the only songs I'd written. I usually write on the piano. I wrote on the guitar. And the tune was just there. It was just that moment where any writer or author or painter or musician or composer knows, where you just know that this is, I wouldn't have it any other way. These two are married, and
you're just happy to find it there in that space and time, and sung it out and played it for my fiance. And I said, "What do you think of this?" And she's like, "Oh, that poem is great." And the words are just, it's almost, I don't want to say easy, but when the words are as good as they are, there's nothing like a great set of lyrics. And that's where this came about. And then I ended up naming the whole album after the poem. So the whole album is titled Marching Still, and this is the song, Marching Still.
She is old and bent and wrinkled in her rocker in the sun, and the thick gray woolen stocking that she knits is never done. She will ask the news of battle if you pass her when you will, for to her the troops are marching, marching still. 7 tall suns about her growing cheered the widowed mother's soul. One by one they kissed and left her when the drums began to roll. They are buried in the trenches, they are bleaching on the hill, but to her the boys are marching, marching still. She was knitting in the corner when the fatal news was read, how the last and youngest perished, and the letter ending said, I am writing on my knapsack by the road with borrowed quill, for the Union armies marching, marching still. Reason sank and died within her, like a flame for want of air. So she knits the woolen stockings for the soldier lads to wear, waiting till the war was ended, for her sons to cross the sill, for she thinks they all are marching, marching still, for she thinks they all are marching, marching still.
Wow, isn't that beautiful? That is such a beautiful song. And I wanted to tell you, I was humming it the other day, I literally was humming it. It was funny, and I was going, what's this melody I'm humming? And then I went, oh my gosh, I'm humming Marching Still. I really am humming. It's so beautiful. And if you just listen to it, you probably are going, da, 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 da. I do. I was humming that melody. It was so funny. So it's great.
Thank you.
I mean, just the fact that somebody would lose, like, that's Saving Private Ryan, bringing that back. That's the losing all the children. And I know they change, and I think that's what Saving Ryan is about, because I think there was, in World War I, there was a bunch of sons from a whole family that got killed, and they were like, well, that's not going to happen again. So either we're going to separate them out, or we're going to do something. But then that's what Saving Ryan's about, is that they're going to find him because he's the last son, and they're going to pluck him out and send him home, because it's not okay, that it wipes out families because of the Civil War. And because that's what happened, like whole families were wiped out. And so that's just so, it's like haunting, that song. It's beautiful, about how do you move forward? Like, how do you move forward after something like that?
Yeah, and apparently, so I actually called the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery in New York about maybe a year ago or so. And after I'd written the song, and I wanted to do research on Minna Irving, and I went to, findagrave.com, and I was tracking down descendants of these poets and authors to see if they're, if they're around, if there's any alive, where are they, and let them know, hey, your great-great-grandfather, he's got this beautiful poem, and I wrote a song to it, and I'd love you to hear it.
Oh, that's great, though.
Yeah, and
I see. I love that. Yeah.
And the people at the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery spoke to this very kind woman, very informative, on the phone, and she said, "Oh, I know Minna Irving very well," and she studied her a lot. And I guess she was known in the town as, I think she died in the 1940s, and she was known, if I'm correct, and she was known as being a little out there. So, there's accounts of, she had a lot of cats, and I think she was only married once and didn't have any children, and that's what I was looking for, if she had any children. And there was accounts of her being in the courthouse, and when she walked in, the rest of the people in the courtroom all got up and moved to the other side to be away from her, because she was, she had that reputation of just being out there. And then you read a poem like that is the epitome of being a human being and the mother. And I just wonder, I think about it constantly. I cannot sing that song or play it without, the whole time, my head and my heart is just, who is she writing this about? Is it true? Is it based off of someone that she knew from the Civil War? That's what I want to know. So the questions are still out there.
Because it sounds like she knows.
Yeah.
She knows. Yeah. She was an artist, and she wasn't Tarrytown, man. It was a rough place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank goodness things are a little bit better now, that you don't have to be ostracized for being able to see inside somebody's soul. That's crazy.
And she's the only, on the whole album, of all the poems, she's the only woman author. Only woman poet.
Oh, interesting.
And it wasn't for lack of looking. It just, or I didn't, it wasn't intentional. It's just, most of what you find, the poems are written by the men, and then she has this, and it ends up being the title, and the whole thing, and it's like, it's crazy. It's wild.
Well, and a shout out to the men, because back then that was when the men were the ones that fought the battles. It wasn't to ostracize the women. It was literally to contain the family and contain the
protect
children,
the kids
and
at
protect everybody at home, and the lifestyle, and they were willing to give up their life to maintain the lifestyle of America,
right?
Of what it was that they were fighting for. So it's. I always like to say, don't forget that maybe the men had all the jobs, but they also fought all the wars. They always were like faced with the bloody conflicts that. There were women that would get involved and be nurses and stuff, but not to the extent of what men did. So, hats off to the men for fighting the big wars. Just saying. Throwing that out there. But to bring it up, the one thing I love about the album as well is that there are some uplifting songs. which is kind of interesting because, I mean, what a time where everybody could be completely, depressed and sad and morose and all of that, but yet you have some uplifting songs too, because they've figured out a way to get through it.
Yeah, there's this one called The 1037, and it was written by this Private Miles O'Reilly, and it was actually published, I forget which newspaper, during the Civil War, and it was a front page where there's this picture of, not a picture, a drawing of these men all toasting around a table, and then the 1037, the poem, is on the front page beneath that. And it's like this ode, this toast to the men that they've lost in their troop. And so they're all singing and toasting and giving a cheer to them. And there's only the 37 of them left, or 11 left by the end. And then paying tribute to those they've lost. But it's this, I read it and I thought, okay, and this happened with a lot of the poems, was, man, black and white, like, it's either this really morose, somber, this dirge, like one of the poems, Lay Him Low, about burying this boy, and it's a dirge for a soldier. It's got a very slow march feel to it. This one, the 1037, I thought this could be the same way. And then I looked, and I saw these exclamation marks at the end of the stanzas. And I interpret that as, and I didn't pay attention to that at first, and I thought, well, an exclamation mark can mean a couple of things. It doesn't mean you're shouting. It can mean I just really want to make a point.
Right. Emphasize.
Yes, and a lot of emphasis. But I took it as, no, I heard that, and then before I saw the picture in the newspaper, and there's nothing like a great poem or a great set of words that paints the picture so well that it just puts it in your mind, and that's what that one did. And so I ended up making this very upbeat, it's a drinking song in a sense, and there's a bunch of guys just singing and shouting together, and it's very lively, and sure, it's about loss, but those of us that are here, here's to life.
Right. Well, and that's the thing back then. I mean, I know because I'm older, and I grew up, my dad was a World War II vet, so I saw a lot of those patriotic movies. My dad would sit down and go, oh, you got to see this, and all those, the patriotic movies. Am I saying it funny? Like John Wayne and all those things. And yeah, it was a little overkill, as people grew up, and as my age group and everything, they'd all be like, oh, they show only the good side and they don't show the horrors of war, which is, I could disagree, because there were a lot of movies back then that showed the horrors of war. Best years of our lives, just saying. But so now we're all the way over here where we're like, it's just horrible. War's horrible. But back then, they really were looking at it from the bigger picture. They'd come from, other countries where they were fighting all the time. They're always fighting for something. They felt like they were fighting for a good cause, especially those who were fighting to free the slaves. And they felt that if it takes my life, takes my life, but I want I'm fighting for that. I'm fighting for the Union, and I'm fighting for the freedom of the slaves, or I'm fighting for what I believe in. And it wasn't as sad, or it wasn't as tragic, because they felt like their life was worth something.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you had that, there was an honor to it, and especially something like, like slavery, and where it's inevitable. And, the nation knew that. And so Civil War was just decades and generations of culminating and reaching that point where something was going to give eventually, and it did. And there's this great in Gettysburg, in one of the museums, there's this great plaque where they'll have quotes, and then a glass case of the uniforms or an encampment, and they'll show a general's tent or the weapons, and depending on what they're showing. But there's this great plaque above one of them towards the outbreak of the war in 1861. And it was from a Massachusetts infantryman, and I'm not gonna get it word for word. It's very short. It's one line, but it's basically this kid responding to the Southerners. And the quote is, "How many are coming? We're all a coming."
Oh. Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, and that sense of pride that it depends on what it's for, and if it's for your nation and each individual freedom. I mean, there's no questioning. I mean, if you're on, hopefully, if you're on that side,
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a valor to it, and I don't think that we're ever. I mean, as a human race, it's a fallen world. To think that war is forever gone, we're never going to reach that point on this earth where that's the case. But there are measures that we can take.
Right.
There are measures we can take to prevent that, and obviously you try everything you can in your power to not do that.
Well, I think the leaders, there's many documents with Thomas Jefferson saying that one day they were going to have to pay, because he was not for slavery. He knew it was something that they just were trying to figure out how they were going to, how to do it. You couldn't just free them, because there was like a lot of prejudice. There was a lot of stuff they had to deal with. And as Grant found, it was really, really hard to do it, but because it was so entrenched. But they all knew, and I think Lincoln knew, and Grant really knew, that it was going to be bloody. They were going to have to do this, and most of them felt like they were all sacrificing themselves for the sin of slavery. That was why it was going to be bloody, was because for so many years they were not congruent with what the Declaration of Independence said and the Constitution, because there were these people that were slaves, and it was wrong. And they all knew it, and when it hit, they knew, and Grant knew, they couldn't stop the war early. And people were pressuring Lincoln to stop it early because it was bloody. But those concessions would be keep slavery. And,
Right.
The movie, of course, shows it really well. The movie Lincoln was good about that. But it was... And they were like, no, we got to do it till the end, until Lee surrenders, so that we can abolish slavery. It was just the way it had to be.
Right.
And they all figured, and I think a lot of the Union soldiers knew that they were basically, it had to happen, and if they died paying the sin of slavery. Which is what is really powerful about the Civil War.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so Gettysburg is such a powerful place to go. I went when I was in 6th grade, and it was just, I remember it like it was yesterday. It was just so powerful, because it was a lot of people died at Gettysburg.
Oh yeah.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah. You can feel it.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
It's like, so the good news out of this, though, is kind of interesting, is that you are going to perform the album at Gettysburg on Memorial Day. So how did that come about? So that's the lead-in to, this is very cool.
This is great. Yeah. So the first performance was November of last year, 2019, at the Drum Barracks Civil War Museum in Wilmington, California. Because, yes, there are Civil War museums in Southern California.
Who knew?
I didn't know until I Googled it.
Really cool stuff there.
And we did it in a parlor. It was built in 1863, I think. And we performed it. There was a piano from 1869, and that was our first performance. I had a small ensemble, myself and my fiance singing the female vocals. She does a gorgeous job. She sings those parlor songs, the ones that are more written for written for a soprano, more of an operatic, with the piano that people would gather around, the Stephen Foster type of songs. On the album, she sings those. She sings the more bluegrass kind of ones, and then Marching Still, which we heard was her on the lead vocal there, and those first
beautiful.
couple verses.
Yeah,
and very versatile. So I'm grateful for that. It's great to have.
That's handy.
And how many melodies I've bounced off of her. So I thank her for that, for putting up with me. And so we did it there, and then there was that painting of U.S. Grant above the fireplace. What a cool spot to be in.
Yeah.
And it was great. The ensemble, it was me on this little 12-string mandolin-style guitar, acoustic guitar. We had a flute, 3 vocals. So that was really, really a lot of fun to do. And then I had applied for a permit at Gettysburg through the park to perform it there. And so I went back in 2019, and we were driving through parts of the Northeast in the summer last year, and put Gettysburg on the stop. I had like half a day, but we put it on the map, on the itinerary. I said, I got to stop at Gettysburg. And now that the album's, I've written them all, and I just went through. I had like 4 hours before everything shut down at 5 o'clock. And I was talking to the Rangers and went to the counters and the help centers and said, hi, I'm Ryan. I'm a composer. I have this Civil War poetry tribute project. And who do I speak to in terms of performance here, bringing this to Gettysburg as part of the park experience? And I actually got some good response. People were interested in it, and I learned that that this wasn't something that they hadn't had, because I asked one of the Rangers, well, do you have a lot of musical performances like this particularly? And she said, no, we haven't had anything like this. So
wow.
I was excited to know that. And I applied for the permit to perform, and it was approved. So this resulted in the Memorial Day performance. So this Memorial Day, on Saturday, May 23rd, 2020, at 7 p.m., Marching Still, the tribute, the whole album will be performed live at the Gettysburg National Military Park Amphitheater, which is an outdoor amphitheater, a part of the battlefield. And we'll be there at 7 o'clock doing this outside on that hallowed ground. I can't believe it. And I get chills just thinking about it, getting to recite these words from these people.
It's amazing.
There.
Isn't that so? I think
Yeah.
it's just great. See, that's what I love. I love the fact that you were inspired by buying the book, and then now you're performing it. And this is something that you want. You want to be able to perform it at all the national, or be able to have it performed at all the national parks, the Civil War national parks.
I would love to bring it around the country, and not only at battlefields and Civil War locations throughout the South, but everywhere, schools. I think you need a reminder, and that's the beautiful thing about history is every so often you need that refresher. And I remember hearing a quote, or somebody said, it's one of those, I just was out there and I heard it, and I don't remember specifically who it was, but that it's not about saying something that's new, or saying something that's never been said before, but being reminded of those things that are of truth and what's good, and that people need reminders of those things that are good and true. And I believe this is one of those things. And I believe we are at a time when we need that reminder very, very critically right now, very crucially. I think as I was writing this, the album, I was going back, and I had Ken Burns' Civil War documentary from 1990 on the background, every day.
This is 30 years ago. That's
30 years ago.
I still can't believe the Ken Burns documentary is 30 years ago. If you had tested me on that, I would have said, it was like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, right?
Yeah. I think about that about the Gettysburg movie from 93.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's right.
And I read an article recently about Ken Burns' documentary, is that we need another documentary, or we need another Civil War. We need to dive back into it as a country. Mm-hmm. And
I know. I remember when that was a big, the way he did it, the zooming in on the letters and the movement of it and everything was a new technology. And now you can do it with your slideshow from your family. You can click on it and it says the Ken Burns. Uh-huh. Yeah. So maybe we do need a new one if it's made it to the.
That documentary is I mean that is an amazing documentary.
It really.
But we do need to revisit, and I would include that in it. His documentary, but we need to revisit that. And I would love to bring this around. And at Gettysburg, we're going to be we're going to be joined by some local musicians in Gettysburg as well. And I'm thrilled that guys who and women who really, really know their stuff, who really know what they're doing, who know this style of music. And our guitarist who's playing with us in May is he's going to become a ranger, and give tours, and he's going to be giving tours, and so he's extremely knowledgeable with this. And the hope is to be joined by other musicians and bring it out, and this will hopefully be not the last time we come to Gettysburg, and that I get to go there. And we've got a couple places in Southern California for the rest of the year that hopefully we'll get a chance to. There's a Lincoln Shrine Memorial in Redlands.
Wow!
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And so would love to bring this out and share it in that way.
Wow, I just think it's great. It's so cool that it's taking this life. And you have an artist that you wish could hear it. You'd like her to hear it because you'd like her to sing Marching Still. Who's that? Because you never know who listens to Sally talk. You never know. We could get it to her. You never know. What's her name?
Miss Alison Krauss.
Ah. So you never know, because she's done some Civil War, little Civil War here and there. It might be something she's interested in listening to and recording.
Well, I know she's not foreign to this theme, this type of song, and this type of music. So, yeah, you do. You never know. And when you hear that poetry, and you also need, you need someone who can express the words. And it's one thing to have it, and then it's one thing to write the music to it, and then it's another thing to then perform it and express it that way.
All the layers, right? All the layers. So that's wonderful. So what else are you working on? Anything else, or is this you do other things, right? You teach. That's one thing.
Yeah. By the way, I'm on part 2 of the Grant
Yay!
biography. So
it's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah. My first, it'll be the longest book I've ever read. But it goes so quick. It's just like water. It just goes right. So easy.
Written by the same man who wrote Hamilton.
That's right. Yeah.
Which inspired LinManuel Miranda.
Yes.
This is what I do for fun. I
too.
read just like LinManuel Miranda.
Yep.
That's like he read it on vacation. I'm like, yay, that's what I do. But it's so fascinating about him. He was a remarkable, unremarkable person.
It's a great way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He really was put in a specific time, and he did exactly what he was, and he was incredibly valuable where he ended up and what he did. It was remarkable of what he did.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I can't wait for the movie about him. I hope that's going to come soon.
I think supposedly, Spielberg has the rights, but it's he's a great guy. We'll see who's in it. We'll see. I don't want to get on it. This is your episode.
But when you asked what else working on, so there was actually a song that the album was strictly to the words needed were going to be the poems, and so I didn't write a single word. There was a song of mine where I did write the words because I have some music published for choirs, choral music. SATB 4-part, and there was a song I'd written a couple of years ago before the album that I had. It was similar in the style that when I was writing, working on Marching Still, I had early on considered maybe including this song of mine in the album, since I felt it could fit stylistically, and the words it passed the test of 1860s America, and then later decided to not go ahead with that, since so it would keep the album strictly that were poems. But that song has actually since been picked up and is going to be published and released this spring, distributed through Hal Leonard, a music publisher.
That's great.
Yeah. The title, it's In Honor to Your Name. And it'll be available this spring for print and purchase for choirs to sing. And it's got that same feel as Marching Still, the album. So if you listen to the album and then you listen to In Honor to Your Name, you'll see the similarity of it's coming from the same root, musical root.
And so you can
Inspiration.
find Marching Still. You can go online and just listen to it.
Yeah, it's at marchingstilltribute.com.
That's easy.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just listen to the whole thing. It's so beautiful. And what was I just was thinking? I was going to ask you something, and then you. So are you working on any? Or so do you want to end up film scoring? Is that what your main dream is? Is to film composer?
Well,
Who's your favorite?
I love Alan Silvestri. Because Forrest Gump was the first piano score that I had.
Oh, right.
Yeah, which is probably true for so many composers and film scores. And at the end of the day, I want to write. Like, I never knew that I would have choral music out in distribution. I never when I was singing middle school choir in the and I never thought that I'd have songs distributed for choirs. Yeah, but here it is. So I at the end of the day, I want to write, and Marching Still really I was able to merge two passions of mine. One in the professional sense, being a professional musician and composer, and then being an amateur historian. I don't want to make any money, or I'm not lecturing in history, but it's a perfect way to blend the two. So this is the first time in my life I've had a chance to really do this, to merge both passions and bring them into one. And I hope to continue to do it and work with other musicians and arrange. I love arranging. It was my favorite part of this whole album, was arranging the words with the music. And hopefully I'd love to continue to do that with other writers and other singers. And I love doing that, bringing something I've written to a singer and say, hey, would you mind singing this? I want to see how this sounds. And so that's my hope. That's my hope.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah. And I was thinking, if anybody is listening and they have, we're going to hashtag the heck out of this, and so we want to spread it around. So if you have any place where you'd like to have a performance of it, or like to be able to hear it, or to play it, or want more information about it, or want you to talk about it, or something like that, that's something that we could. You should share it around and get it out there, because I just think it's great. You can play it. And the truth is, it doesn't, like you were saying, it doesn't have to be Civil War, because it speaks to any of them. I mean, World War II, and anything where you're dealing with, or any Memorial Day, or Veterans Day, or something where we're being mindful about the sacrifice and the loss.
Right. And this, and you're absolutely right, is this album and this tribute goes beyond the Civil War. This is dedicated to anybody who served in military, families, wives, husbands, children who have friends who have lost a loved one. Those are veterans. This goes to everybody. This is for everyone. This is for every American. This is for people in the world. I mean, this is for them.
Yeah. They've said that in, I think it was in Iraq, and the time when we were in the Iraq, when we started in the Iraq War, the number one movie that everyone was watching, I think it was The Patriot. Which is kind of interesting. Yeah. It's interesting, not the most historical accurate, but it was, right. But still, I mean, it's just interesting that we have to remember that there's a lot of, because we are the first democracy or republic, really, we were the first ones. I know there's other countries now, people talk about other countries that have now, like, they do this and do that, that's fine, but we have to remember that we were really the first ones, that the first country that was started on the individual, on the not having being voted, the leaders being voted in, and all of that. I mean, that was really, and so there are other countries that look to us, and like all the demonstrations that were going on in Hong Kong, and they were carrying American flags and all of that, because we're inspirational for that. So we've had our trials and tribulations and trying to hold on to the Republic. And so I think it's important to remember it and to listen and to hear it. So that's why I just thought it was really so great. I thought it was just really cool. And I really admire you for just jumping on the creative you got inspired and you just did it. I mean, it's great. A lot of other people would be like, oh, that'd be a nice thing. And then you put the book away and then you...
Oh, yeah.
But it just like it grabbed hold of you and you did it. And now you're going to play it in Gettysburg. I mean, it's cool.
It's great. I love the merging. I had a chance. I did this for, a few years at the Walt Disney Studios, archiving all the old film scores and preserving them. And this is the same idea that we have to preserve, we would restore and preserve all of the old songs and the scores to the movies, the sheet music, and it's the same idea as preserving that. And I had an old supervisor who told me I would joke around with this. I would play old montages of Civil War black and white photos, and I would just play old, little tune on the piano and score along with it. But she told me, she said, I think you're going to do this someday. I think you're going to do this, looking at this pretend montage, this just fooling around, this joke. And that was like 4 years ago. And she was right. I'm doing it.
Isn't that funny? That's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
That's why it's important what other people say. Sometimes people say things that will stick with you and that ends up being, did you remember that while you were working on it, or did it come to you later after you did? Or while you were working on it,
Yeah,
you were
I thought,
oh my gosh, I'm really doing it.
Yeah, instantly. And I thought, oh, she was right. I'm doing it. I'm going to do it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we'll end on that note. Thank you so much for being on. I loved having you on. I can sit and talk about this stuff all day. And I was proud of myself that I didn't talk too much about Grant. One day I'll just do my own episode and I'll just talk about Grant.
Yeah.
But I'm going to put the flyer up on our on my page. I'll put the flyer up. If you're in the area, I'm tossing around going to visit my sister and I'd love to go see it and go back to Gettysburg because I've been there since I was a kid. And even though I remember it like it was yesterday, the one thing I wanted to say was people forget about, or people don't realize, I was thinking about being a park ranger at one point, and it was amazing the education you need to be a park ranger. You need to have at least a 4-year college education, and majoring in history, and then to be a ranger at like Gettysburg is like a plum job. So you have to be like the best of the park rangers to be there.
Oh yeah,
because it's such a popular one.
Yep.
And those people have you captivated. You sit there and you're like, they tell you the stories of all of it, and boy, they know every detail. But they also know how to tell it, and it's just fascinating. So it's a wonderful place to go. So
and important to support them and what they do.
Yeah. There was years ago. I think I told you this. There was a Disney ad where they were like showing the kids going to a Civil War battlefield with their dad, and they said, "Tell Dad not to take you to another Civil War battlefield. Go to Disney World." I actually wrote them a letter because I was mad.
You did?
Yes, I did because I was mad. It was back when you write letters.
Yeah.
I don't think I did an email. I did letters, but I get mad about those things, and I know. And I was like, "How dare you?" My father took me to all the battlefields, and I loved it, and it's wonderful memories. And sure, go to Disneyland. I'm not saying don't go to Disneyland, but geez, go to but our history is important. So
yeah, and you don't know if you've never been there. You don't know until you go.
Right.
It speaks for itself. So give it a chance.
It's so fascinating.
So,
yeah.
Toss the kids in the wagon
and take them to
get on the road.
Take them to the battlefield. Yeah. So anyway, thank you so much. So we'll put all that information, and then I'll repost it, of course, as it gets closer on. And best of luck with all of this, because I think it's a great. I'm a big supporter. So I'm
Thanks,
so
Sally.
happy you came on.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Thanks for everybody for listening, and we will talk again soon.